Would you be my spiritual director? Do you need spiritual direction? Well, to answer that question, you need to know what the heck spiritual direction is. So a spiritual director is someone who helps you in your spiritual life, like a little guide to show you the pitfalls, to help you discern. They're also good at dancing. They're really good if you need help, with some new dance moves. You could go to your spiritual director and say, father, brother, sister, I need something new. I need something fresh. And then maybe, the Holy Spirit will give you something. Okay, does everybody need a spiritual director? No. The easy answer to that question, is it helpful? Would everyone find it helpful? Yes, definitely. It doesn't have to be a priest or a nun or a religious brother. It could be just someone who's more experienced than you in the spiritual life. They've just been following Jesus longer. And some are just really, really good. Some people have a gift for this. You could say a charism. So God specially graces them to do this as a service to the church. So if you find one of those, you want to, get all of their contact details, and then you want to stalk them. Okay? Again, why would you want a spiritual director? So if you think about your health, so most people have a doctor, right? And if someone says, oh, no, I don't have a doctor, you're like, oh, you're just amazingly healthy all the time. But it's also a good thing to have a doctor and be registered with a doctor, if that's how the system works in your country, you don't know. But it's good to kind of know one or have contact with one, so that if something serious comes up, you don't have to do all of the administrative detail. You could just go straight to the doctor. Now, if your physical health is really important, how much more so your spiritual health? Ultimately, if you get sick and die, that's not nearly as serious as if your soul is sick, like seriously sick, and you die, and then you die. You die the second death, which is eternal damnation. Much more serious, folks. Short life of 70 to 80 years versus forever. So having a spiritual director, a spiritual doctor in your life is way more important than a physical doctor. But we tend to ignore the spiritual side and just focus on the physical side. From that perspective, it's pretty important. How can you get a spiritual director? You can just ask somebody. So the way you do that is, if they don't know you, you first of all introduce yourself. You might ask them their name, and then you go, would you be my spiritual director? Do you want to go on a spiritual direction date? You do have to ask somebody. And yeah, you just gotta pop the question. It can be awkward, you need to get your timing right. But if you just give them some chocolate, first of all, once they're and there's chocolate everywhere, you say, this could happen more often, You want to be my spiritual director? I'm just saying that, just putting that out to all my spiritual directees, bit of chocolate every now and again wouldn't hurt. I really do hope they watch this. That'd be awesome. And they bring me chocolate, all of them. Okay, moving swiftly on. Seriously though, how do you get one? So the usual mainstay, as I've said, for spiritual directors is a priest. So often people will ask, like in the context of confession, they might even ask some questions in the context of confession. So it kind of becomes like spiritual Direction-Lite, let it being official. And sometimes if that goes well, they might be like seeing how good you are, not just with, forgiving their sins, which is pretty amazing, but actually, if you ask them a question about the spiritual life, their answer is pretty spot on. Then once you kind of know, okay, this priest is he knows his stuff, then they might ask you in the context of confession or afterwards, or just call and leave a message on your phone. And I'm not going to leave you my phone number. This is getting really, really weird. Of course, the other hilarious thing is breaking up with your spiritual director, but that would be way too weird. We'll save that for the end of the talk. How regularly do you see one? Often it's once a month, but the other way it can be just when you need it. And I don't just mean when all hell is breaking loose, but okay, I've got this question, or enough's been going on in my spiritual life. I think I need to just get a little checkup, a little MOT. Could be less frequent than once a month, once every 2 months, every 3 months, depending on your particular needs. Sometimes though, you can be in a time of like crisis, or a time of just deep need in terms of like, I'm discerning my vocation. No, I'm not. I'm pretending I'm you. So let's say you're discerning your vocation, and you need clear guidance, because that can be a difficult thing, can be a confusing thing. You're in danger of going off the rails, or just putting it on the long finger, like just discerning forever. I'm now 57 and I'm still discerning my vocation. I think, you probably could figure this one out in your 20s. But when you're figuring something like that out, really helpful to be able to talk to someone who's experienced in it. So if that's the case, then yeah, I would definitely recommend you get a spiritual director when you are discerning your vocation. And most priests, religious, or just folks in your life who know you're discerning, they will be they'll make themselves available, partly because they know it's only going to be for a little while, but also because they know the need is much greater. All right. Next topic. I touched on this briefly. You can do a little bit of sneaky spiritual Direction-Lite in the context of confession. Do the confession thing and then just, at the end say, Father, could I just ask you a little question? Insert spiritual question. So in my prayer life, I've found that I keep having visions of Yoda and he keeps attacking me. What does that mean? And he will look at you or not look at you, depending on how you're doing the confession, and scratch his head and then go, okay, see you next month. But just ask your question in the context of confession. And that can be a great way. Now, you're not going to be able to take piles of time, depending on how many people are there for confession. If your parish, they don't get many for confession, then it's not going to be a problem. But seriously, you use that. Just tag on the questions onto the end of your confession. That can be really, really helpful. But you can probably only ask one, maybe two questions, and it might be pretty brief answers. The other thing is you could get recommendations from the priest just on resources. Like, do you recommend a book on this topic, or a website, a podcast, etc.? Which brings up another great point. You don't just need to get humans to direct you. Books are a fantastic resource. Getting the right book recommendations can be tricky. Better know spiritual books than bad spiritual books, okay? You want to be formed in the right way. So ask someone you trust and someone who knows their faith, loves Jesus, and won't give you some weird and wacky recommendations. What do you do when you're then in spiritual direction? So there's different ways different people direct. Some can be very directive. They can really tell you what to do. I'm not a big fan of that model. They tell you all the books to read. They tell you, no, don't pray that way, pray this way. The difficulty with that is sometimes it can be the spiritual director almost trying to form you into them, little thems, and everybody is different, and everyone's spirituality and individual temperament needs are slightly different. So the way that you pray really effectively may not be the way Father Columba prays really effectively. So if I was your spiritual director, I need to be really sensitive to that and help you figure out what's the way that you pray best? What's the way God has created you to connect with him? What are the kind of books that are really going to help you? Because we're not necessarily going to have the same needs or tastes. So that's one kind of way of directing. So if your director is really strong that way, that's okay. It might work for you. Just test it. Other spiritual directors are much more on the listening front. So they're really going to just let you talk. They want to hear your story. They're really just going to kind of listen with you. And for me, this has been something really helpful, especially when I was discerning my vocation. I would go to a spiritual director, lovely Vincentian. It really just kept me accountable. So every month I'd have to turn up and have to have produced something, or done some prayer and maybe some reading and some thinking about my vocation. And I just have to be accountable to him and say, listen, this month I didn't do much, or this month, I just felt when I was listening to God, I kind of felt, this idea, these thoughts, these feelings were coming up. What do you think about that? Accountability, being a soundboard. They can just listen to you, and they spent probably a lot more time than you listening to God and learning his voice. So if you share something that you believe God is saying to you, they might be able to get a sense of, that sounds good. Yeah, I think you're on the right track. Or if they pick up oh no, red flag. No, that sounds way too condemning to be God's voice, for example, then that could be helpful, right? So that you've got this mature pair of ears to really hear and to give you feedback on, does this sound like God to you? But however the director might direct, for yourself, I would say, certainly prepare yourself a little bit beforehand. Look back over how long has it been since I was on direction last time? What's been the big questions? If you keep a journal, look through your journal. What's been the issues coming up? God's directing me in some way, and the spiritual director is to help me let God direct me. Okay, so what's God been saying? And bring those things. So in my prayer, there's been a lot of this coming up. So there's a lot of, God's bringing up humility a lot recently. So I've been trying to work on that, but do you have suggestions and help? How can I grow in humility? So to look at that, to look over your time period, look at what the themes are and bring those and just share them. Sharing particular struggles with sin, virtue, how to grow in it, that sort of thing. And let yourself be challenged, be humble, really ask the Lord and expect the Lord to work through this spiritual director. Be open, be docile, to let them teach you and encourage you and all of that beautiful, good stuff. And finally, we come to the really awkward bit. What if you need to break up with your spiritual director? So what I recommend on this one is to make it as awkward as possible, to kind of come in and just say, listen, father or brother, sister, I'm sorry, but this just isn't working. It's not you, it's me. I'm just not ready for this level of commitment. So I gotta go. Or even better, just send them a text message. Okay, no, I'm joking. I would only shift spiritual directors if there's a negative impact on your life. Like it's like sincere. You're not doing this because you just want someone who's softer and isn't as challenging, but you really feel, no, I think this isn't the right fit. So I need to go shopping again. Lovely. This has been brilliant. You guys are awesome. God bless you. I hope that's been helpful. Bye-bye.